Faintly, now I feel you here, softly, steady, as you teach me how.
I was watching this video of your TED Talk where you start with that thing that Vaughn Freeman told you. The answer is inside you, or you are the answer.
You have the answer.
You have the answer. Learn how to translate it.
Yes. And the way he said it was just, you have the answer. Learn to translate it. Not even learn how to, but just learn to translate it. And I'll never forget it, Pablo, because it was, just over the phone. This is before any video stuff. And I was just, I was so lucky to be able to call him up. And he'd be at home almost always. He was always home. Because I would, and he lived with his brother, George. But either sometimes George would pick up and then call for Vaughn, and then Vaughn would get on. But I got to pick his brain. He let me call him and just ask him questions, and I usually would take notes and because he was, I didn't have a relationship with my grandparents on either side because of the distance and language. So Vaughn was very much that figure, like a grandfather figure.
That generation also.
Yeah, exactly. So he was the age of what my grandparents would have been. And when he gave me that wisdom, I think I was really, I'd already started singing with Steve Coleman, and actually it was Steve who introduced me to Vaughn, for which I'm very grateful. And I was very kind of figuring out whether to try to do the, jazz standards and really kind of know everything there is about that music and learning every single solo, of all the giants, and then kind of breaking, trying to write my own music, which to me at that time was so much harder to conceive because I had no idea. I was new at composing,
What year would this be?
Oh, this was 2003 or 4, 3, I think 2003.
Yeah.
And that was just the time when I moved to New York and started singing with Steve's band, and everything was new. And all my kind of training before that was all classical. And I did sing a little bit of course I was improvising a little bit. I was singing with a jazz group in the Bay Area. I guess it had been 2 or 3 years that I was singing around town with a drummer's band mainly, and then, but also with a beautiful group of more creative musicians. And that would have been like Francis Wong and John Jang, John Carlos Perea. Actually, we had a collective that Jamie Biala, who was a Filipino drummer, wonderful percussionist in so many different traditions, not just his own from the Philippines, but he was deeply studied in Cuban, Afro-Cuban, and Afro-Brazilian percussion. And so he and his then partner, Lenore Lee, who's an amazing dancer, who has her own company now, they've asked myself, John Carlos Perea, who's a great bassist, vocalist, and flute player, and Melody Takata, who was a kind of a taiko master drummer. And so the 5 of us had this beautiful collective, which they called the Red Jade Collective. And that was such an important group for me to be part of, because it was interdisciplinary, it was multicultural, and informed so much of who I am today. And then playing with Francis Wong and John Jang, they were really important mentors for me, and still are really important friends and mentors to this day. Like I just saw them in February, and they were really the ones to point me in the direction of looking at my ancestry, really, really deeply. And before I, of course, being a second generation, I was the first generation born in this country, my parents being immigrants from Timor-Leste and Taiwan. But typical, I mean, very common among children of immigrants. There was a lot of denial, a lot of shame around being who I was, being Asian, because the racism was so strong, and where I was, the school I went to, and kids are kids, they're mean, and that really shaped how I felt about my identity, and it was all about assimilation at that point. It was all about how can I fit in, and
fitting in. Yeah.
So there was, and my parents, they just, they were trying to support. I don't think I even told them much about the kind of ostracization that I was feeling in school, and for me, music and that was really kind of what saved me, because in for some reason in the music communities that, in Little Peoria, the city where I did most of my activities, the community was very nice. It was just in the school where I was every day, that it was just so, I was like, kids booing when I won the spelling bee in 6th grade. I'll never forget that. And just, and I don't,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I but I think that's a lot of kids, if they get good grades, or if they are considered the teacher's pet, the other kids are going to get mad and jealous and all that. But I think the racial, being the only, well, there's one other Asian girl, and she was Korean American. Her mom was Korean.
How did you get along?
Father, I mean, it's such a funny thing. I defended her many times when people would make fun of her mom's accent, or they would call her name was Susan, and her father was American. His name was Tompkins, so she went by Susan Tompkins, but her mother was Korean. And apparently she would pick her up and drop her off, and the other kids would make fun of the way her mom spoke to her. So they would call her Sushan instead of Susan, and so they would just walk around saying Sushan, Sushan. And I would try to defend, and I don't think I defended her very well, but I tried. I was like, that's just the way her mom talks. Stop making fun of her, I'm like, stop it. And I don't know. I to this day, I always find that my comebacks are too late or non-existent.
A lot of people feel that way, I think.
Yeah. They're like, I should have said this.
Yeah.
But
here's what I'm going to say next time.
Yeah,
I'll be
next
prepared.
time,
I'm going to get them.
Yeah. But going back to Vaughn, that when I was, I had recorded my first album before I met Steve, and it was mainly an album of standards. It's on my Bandcamp now. It's called For Now. And it's all standards except for one Taiwanese folk song arrangement that I did. And that was kind of it was like the window into kind of what I would follow. And so when I gave the album
was it a big deal for you to kind of dare to include that in that?
Yeah, the Taiwanese folk song. Well, it was so funny because it was a Taiwanese folk song, but I decided to sing it in Mandarin, which, if you know the politics between China and Taiwan, that's already fraught. Yeah. But my dad said, he's like, it's fine to do it in Mandarin, because that was the language I grew up, like the household. My parents spoke Mandarin to each other because my mom was Hakka Chinese, but learned Mandarin because when the Indonesian occupation started, when the war between Indonesia and East Timor started in East Timor, my mom had already been sent away to Taiwan. So her father knew what was going to happen, I think. Because he was friends with diplomats, and he was a businessman, so I think he knew what was coming. So he slowly sent all his 13 kids away.
Whoa,
So
13.
my mom was the eldest of 13.
Wow.
And so he sent her away to Taiwan first. And so she must have been 13 or 14 when she did that, and when he did that. So by the time that war started, I think all of his kids were either in Australia or my mom in Taiwan. I think one sister of hers, he sent to Hong Kong, maybe. So everyone was dispersed, and they sold their house. They really didn't think they would ever get to see Timor again, because it was, they knew war. It was wartime, and so my mom learned Mandarin in Taiwan. She did go to Chinese school in Timor. They actually had a Chinese school. There were enough Hakka Chinese from China who were in Timor, which is kind of amazing. And and I don't even know the numbers yet. I need to research that. But it was a large enough community that even one of my mom's sisters married another Chinese Timorese guy, so there were enough of them around. They were marrying, each other. So what was I leading with that?
You were including the folk song.
Oh, yes. So because my mom didn't speak, she learned Mandarin because at that time, Taiwanese, because of, there's so many things, because of the Kuomintang, China at that time, this would have been 59, I think, because mom was born in 44. So 1959, they were under martial law, basically. So this was under Chiang Kai-shek. So like Mandarin, if you spoke Taiwanese, you could have been punished. They were.
Wow.
So it was this whole wave of, okay, only Mandarin taught in the schools. So mom, of course, became fluent in Mandarin, but did not learn Taiwanese. And this was after Japanese occupation also in Taiwan. So at this point, China was in, the Kuomintang, Chiang Kai-shek was in control, and there were already many deaths. They say like up to 28,000 around. It's probably more, but during the time they called the White Terror, like 28,000 Taiwanese were killed, and mostly intellectuals. So yeah, certain class students, were killed. And then the rest of, the people who survived were suppressed, could not speak Taiwanese and all of this. So anyway, that's why my parents spoke Mandarin at home. And that was the common language. So what I heard growing up was Mandarin.
Thank you for checking out this episode. If you enjoy these conversations, please consider joining me on patreon.com/Pablo Held. My Patreon community helps me to pay for the running costs of this podcast and to develop it further into the future. There's 2 ways to join me there. The interview tier will give you access to lots of behind-the-scenes content. And also you get every episode before everybody else gets, so that's early access to episodes. The other option is the music lessons tier, which will give you everything from the interviews tier, plus 2 video lessons on different topics each month. Lead sheets, so whenever I transcribe a new song, you'll get it first. You'll be invited to listening sessions and much more. So these are 2 options for you to join me there. By doing that, you will be helping me to continue this podcast. So thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
So the Taiwanese folk song was I mean, it was a beautiful song. What I realized through the process of, I was arranging other folk songs as well, and these were I got access to these folk songs because they were photocopied and sent over, mailed from my 4th grand auntie, who is my dad's uncle. So my dad's mother had siblings, and I want to say she had like 5, at least 5, maybe, oh no, more, 9. I had like 5 grand aunties and 4 grand uncles. I think there were 9 total.
You have a big family. That's
a big
amazing.
family. Oh my gosh. So this is on my dad's side only. Yeah. So yes, I had a large mom's side family, but also dad's side was very large. So my grandmother's younger brother, and we called him the fourth uncle, he was very close with my dad. My dad treated his 4th uncle like a father almost, and what my brother and I recall, my dad wasn't that close to his own father. I think, in fact, I think he feared him a little bit. I think his own father was pretty strict, and there was a lot of pressure on my dad because he was one brother of 6, and he had 6 sisters. So he's the only male among the 7 of them. He had 6 sisters, and so there's a lot of pressure on him to succeed, to study. Like, that's all he did. He said he studied, and but somehow he got really into Western classical music in Taiwan. And I don't know how. And I'm so sad because he passed away in 2019 that I can't ask him. Like, how did you find out? How did you even hear classical music at that time? He was born in 1941. So we're talking like World War II, and they'd already been suffering a lot. So, and he said he grew up with no shoes, and he remembers just, running around with no shoes. And yeah, so I don't know how he got access, but he was obsessed with it apparently, and brought that obsession to the U.S. when he went into graduate school. So he did his undergrad in Taiwan, as did my mom. My mom also did her undergrad at Taiwan University. My dad went to Chen Gong University, which was like almost engineering. It was a special college that had strong engineering programs. So, and then they both got scholarships to Syracuse. They hadn't met in Taiwan yet. But they both got scholarships for their graduate studies at Syracuse University in New York, and that's where they met. So, yeah, it's kind of incredible.
I always think about that. Like we're born, and all of us do these crazy spins. On some stay in their hometown, and some go abroad, and like how it actually ends up that 2 people meet and like each other, or that something happens, and then a family grows out of it, or a relationship, a band.
Right?
Like, that's wild.
It is wild. And just kind of thinking of all the pieces that had to come together for that to happen. It's mystical. It's very mystical. So yeah, going back to that song, I realized,
those Taiwanese folk songs, how would they, like, if you said that they're photocopied?
Yeah, it was just
in
sheet
which
music.
way are they written down? Like in usual
So it was
sheet
Western.
music, or?
It was Westernized already, and so I have the book in my. I found the book later when I actually went to Taiwan. I found the book from which she made these photocopies. And because of course, when I first went to Taiwan, the first thing I did was I wanted to meet my, we called Shikugong and Shikinpo is what I called them. Shikugong is fourth grand uncle, and she is four, and then Shikinpo is the wife of the uncle, so my auntie. And she loved to sing. Apparently she was in choir, and that's why she sent these photocopies to my dad to give to me, because she knew that I was interested in music. And yeah, so the notation, it was Western notation. It was only the melody that was notated, and then like all the lyrics in Mandarin Chinese. So there's no English in the whole book. It was just
how
Mandarin.
About chords or harmonies?
No chords. Or no.
Just melody.
It was just that one melody of this one folk song. Yeah.
Can you sing it?
I could. Yeah. So this song that was on this album, see, I can't remember the lyrics anymore, but the melody was da 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 la da da la da ya da da ga na na ya na na da la da na. Or it could have been like da 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 da. I don't know. I can't remember. I kind of did my own thing, and then da ya da da ya da 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 no da ya no la da da ga ya da. So very beautiful melody, and I just like. It was just from sheet music that I learned it. And so, I looked at several of these melodies, and I started to arrange them for, bands that I was putting together. And I think, I played with John Carlos Perea a lot. He was kind of my main bassist at the time. And Francis was in there. So, but I worked with different musicians, I think, at the time, but it was mainly Francis, and then Jimmy on percussion. So the album that I recorded was John Carlos, Jimmy, Francis, and then for a few of the tunes I invited Art Hirahara to play piano, and then another pianist, Dee Spencer, to just do some kind of torch songs, just voice and piano. I did a couple torch songs with her. And and the album, so when I gave Vaughn my album, he loved it. He loved it. And even after I was writing new music and I released, a new album, I think called Jade Tongue, which was very influenced. You can hear I was like exploring all this language stuff. I was finding my own sound, but rhythmically very influenced by Steve, Steve's drum chants and everything. Just because I was in the middle of that, in the middle of his music. And so I would kind of poo-poo this Standards album. Whenever I talked to Vaughn, I was like, oh, it's old. Like I was a baby then. I didn't know what I was doing. And he would always say, Jen, you shouldn't deny that part of yourself. It's beautiful. And you're just going to keep evolving, but it's still you. So you shouldn't deny, so yeah. So when I look back on that time,
what led to him? What led to him saying, please say it again.
How is it? You have the answer. So I was just about to go into that. I think it's because I was conflicted. Like I had just started writing my own music, but I thought, oh, people aren't going to like it. It's not going to be popular. It's too weird. Like who's going to be interested in anything Asian? I think maybe at that time I already had a sense of what they call Asian hate, which came up when the Atlanta shootings, that kind of became one of the things that came out. And I think I maybe had a sense, maybe it's because of all the kind of the racism I had directly received at the time. So I thought, no one likes Asians, Like,
it stays with you, right? It stays with you, and you kind of project it onto whoever or like it's an anonymous crowd, even like you want to do your music, but they are not going
exactly.
but they are still like this day is still connected to to those experiences, I guess. Huh?
And you know, it's I mean, it's some kind of, I don't know what the word trauma now is used a lot, and I don't know if, you know, but it was definitely something that, you know, I think we all have to keep processing. I'm probably still processing it, but I think what at the time my big desire was, well, you know, I mean, I think I started with this kind of denial, and so I buried myself into like doing Western classical music excellently, you know, and then even with opera, you know, at Stanford, I actually was an opera major, and as I was singing opera, and I thought, oh, this is what I'm going to do, um, and I did love, you know, when I was introduced to jazz and improvisation and African American, um, um, the tradition, and Black American music, I was so drawn toward it, and I realized when I started improvising or trying to improvise, I think that's when it clicked that I wanted to do something more than just reproduce or reinterpret other people's music. Like, as beautiful as it was, I was like, wait, you know, that there's something here. And then the kind of music I wanted to create didn't exist yet. Like, you know, it was like I wanted to, you know, starting with these Taiwanese folk songs, like that was the door. Like that was my first experiment. And because I was like, I don't want to, you know, I was very familiar with the very stereotypical restaurant music. You know, every time you went to a Chinese restaurant, and there's only one in Peoria. Every time we went there, it was this kind of like very stereotypical, the stuff I hated, you know, and then the stuff that people would sing to make fun of me, you know, like whatever, you know, pentatonic, din, 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 din. I mean, just like, stop it, you know, like, stop making fun of me. And so it's like, I know I want to make something not that, you know, that is not that. And these melodies I thought were very beautiful, but I realized that as I was arranging them and trying to, you know, make harmonies with them, I knew that it was shallow. I knew that I didn't have real experience with these melodies or knew where they came from. So that's what led me to want to go back to Taiwan. And so I think it was in this dilemma before I went to Taiwan that I was talking with Vaughn already, I think. God, is that true? The timeline is so fuzzy. Or had I already gone to Taiwan? Maybe I already had gone to Taiwan, but I was like, you know, I was just beginning to process and like, what am I going to do with all this research? You know, I had just started learning the moon lute, the Taiwanese moon lute, and these Taiwanese folk songs. You know, one of these folk songs, I remember one of the folk songs that was in the sheet music. It was a melody. It was like, dun da 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 na 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 da 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 da. It was like all written out in, you know, Western notation. But when I went to Taiwan and I went to Hengchun, which was in the southern part where I found the moon lute, I was recording these elders singing a song. For instance, the melody was Bui ki dai tang and meanwhile the lute would be well, I can play it for you.
Oh yeah.
So this is one of the I have to do it. Let me. So this is what the tuning would have been. So, you know, before it was like I had that dun da 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 na 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 na, which is just what I learned from sheet music. And then when I started recording, and this is one of the songs that they sang for me. So the lyrics I don't. I'm just gonna have to make up the lyrics. I haven't memorized them. for a while. So, but it'd be something like, Pueki tai tangaya tangata. You know, so in like that, and or in the da da na na da na na dun dun go na 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 ba da da. So that was kind of how one verse went. So totally different because, you know,
the other thing is seen through the Western way of notating music. And this is such a different thing.
Yeah. And, you know, the phrases. So I would ask her, you know, the teacher would just sing it. And then I was like, trying to count. Well, how many times you do? She's like, there's no counting. It's just whenever the phrase, whenever you run out of breath, you know, whenever you feel like singing the next phrase, you know.
Ah, beautiful.
And I'm like, oh, I love that. So it kind of.
That's rubato. That's the explanation for rubato. In a way.
Yeah. And of course,
rubato playing.
This always had a pulse, but when you would start the next phrase, there was no measurement of, you know, the space between. So, you know, there's so many things. And also, you know, and I this is hilarious. One of the lessons, like her lute had to happen to be tuned like a tritone. And, you know, usually, and of course she never, you know, they weren't talking about tritones or fourths. Like they don't have a language. This is just an elder woman who absorbed and learned these songs orally. And so one time she had her her lute like this, and I was like, wait, and I was so trying to like, but wait, don't you have to? Isn't that the right? That's not the right. And she's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, it doesn't matter. Just play, you know? So then I was like, you know, my mind was blown. And, you know, so it just, I mean, I have so many stories, Pablo, of, you know, kind of being shaken out of my whole, yeah. I mean, that was a wonderful one because it's like, well, okay, I'm not going to be married to, you know, just opening my mind to other ways of thinking. And how beautiful that was, and that like I need to let go and shed, you know, really have to let go of my own. It's like, I've learned these things, but there's this wealth of, you know, there's a whole other way of thinking that these elders have. And so, yeah, I think that the key to learning is shedding and letting in other people's wisdom, you know, and just, So I think Vaughn, you know, it all goes back to what Vaughn was saying because when he, you know, when I was so kind of scared and kind of anxious about what do I want to create? What music? Like, it's going to be so hard. I don't even know what I'm doing. And he just said, you have the answer. Basically, you know, like what you want to create is within you. You just have to, you know, manifest it, basically. So
what I liked about the word translated is that your answer is universal.
Yeah.
And you have to translate it means to me, or what I thought it means is like to be able to reach somebody, you have to you have to find a way to tell it to them.
Yes.
In various languages, which you do, you know.
Right. I mean, you could think of it as also, it's this thing inside you. You know what the message is, but it's just a matter of putting it in sound and words and tone, or, you know, all the ways you want to express that thing. It's like you just have to bring it out. that's our craft, right?
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of things you just have to try, and inevitably it's going to be awkward and clunky at the beginning, but it's in that trying, you just have to keep, however many iterations it takes, that's the process that it takes to kind of, shape it and mold it into, closer to what you're trying to say. And so anyway, yeah,
Wow.
It's a wonderful, I can't believe he said that, and how profound it was that he said that. And when he did say it to me over the phone, I immediately started crying. And I think at that time, I probably wasn't even thinking of craft. I think it was more about faith. Like what he was giving me was faith in myself that I didn't even have. I had so many doubts.
You're okay. You're okay, right?
You're okay for him.
Yeah.
That's
no,
what
no.
he was,
You have everything. You are
exactly.
the answer. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing wrong with you.
Exactly.
And you don't have to fit in.
Right.
You just have to find a way to bring out what you are for everybody else, and to connect with others.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly, it was a very empowering thing for him to say, and comforting. And I think I cried because it's like, it was just a hand he was giving me, like a hand to hold. And I really miss him for that, because he was really so wise. And I'm trying to think of other things he used to say. Well, the grace that he had, this is kind of unrelated, but it's still something in our industry. I think what we learn as we go through our careers is how to suss out the stuff that's not true or authentic or sincere. You can, and those forces are always coming at you, wherever you go. And I remember, I loved the way he, we were at the club. It was a new apartment lounge in the south side of Chicago. And we used to go there to hear him play. And then there would be a jam session after. And so I think at one of these sessions, some guy came in, and he was just like, "Hey, Vaughn." And I think he was like, he had a radio station, or I can't remember, but somehow he was very aggressive and talking a lot, and seemed to have a big ego. And Vaughn just in, very gracefully cut him off. He's like, because it was right before his set. It was right about he was about to play. And he said, "Oh, thank you. Do you have a card? Do you have a card that?" And then the guy was like, "Oh, yeah, here it is." He's like, "Thank you so much. We're going to start our set right now." And, it's just so elegant. Yeah. These little things just from watching him.
Yeah.
But he was full of warmth and grace. He didn't get annoyed. And although another time I did see him again, and this is older. This is like later, years later, but because I think people were talking in the other room when I was singing, and he went over there and yelled at them.
What did he say?
He was like, "This young lady is trying to sing. She's trying to sing up here." But yeah, that was later. That was like a few years later, I think.
Yeah.
And it might have been one of my last times I got to see him, because then I went to Indonesia. And I believe he passed away when I was in Indonesia, like 2012, 2013 maybe. So yeah, I was very far away. And so I think I'm grateful I saw him, before he passed, before I went and did all those travels.
What were other things that you asked him?
Well, he did give me some, and I have a napkin, actually. He did write out some chord progressions, because over one chord, and he was like giving me a path of, oh, here are some of the tonalities that I might go through, if just one chord is playing, and then he would, yeah, going to the, so he would improvise over a dominant, and I'd have to dig out that napkin again. But yeah, he was giving me some beautiful knowledge there, and he was like scribbling on a napkin. So after he played, he would go to the back of the bar and just sit there, and then so then I would go back there and pick his brain after I'd sing a tune, but yeah, sometimes the conversations were just about life. And I remember we were talking about love for some reason, the relationships, and he said, it's really important that you like a person. It's even more important that you like that person that, more so than love. It's like, yeah, love is good, but you have to like them.
Yeah, it's true.
That was wonderful. So, yeah. Oh, there's so many things. I did keep some journals. I would write to him. I wrote letters to him. Yeah. And I think I have some of those. I think I would type them out. So I would write them by hand, and then I would type them out. So I remembered what I wrote to him. And yeah. Special. Yeah.
There's something that I wanted to say when we were talking about that you wanted to do a certain kind of music that you weren't hearing anywhere else.
Yeah.
And just in these past weeks where it was like heavily listening to you, I've been checking you out since a long time. But these weeks were kind of intense because I was like, I'm going to talk to Jen. So I was checking out albums that I hadn't heard before, and also my favorite ones that I've been listening to on repeat. But like yesterday, there was one moment in Song of Silver Geese. Geese. And it's a song after World of Ati Batik. The song after that.
Song after. So there's that World of Baridegi.
I guess.
8.
Yeah.
Very
it's
intense,
like,
and
very intense,
rhythmic.
7 minutes rhythmic. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's one moment where I thought like, and this is like after years of listening to you, I was like, what kind of music is this? What is this music? You know what I mean? And I think this is exactly in a way what you maybe intended to do, not to stumble somebody or to freak somebody out.
Right.
But in terms of like, I've never heard anything like this before in my life.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, thank you. I think that's a compliment. Yeah. I mean, that's what I hope what I hope to do is, to, my partner and I, my partner is a lawyer, a patent, he works in intellectual property, and he's challenging the word innovation, which I guess in their industry is heavily used, and a lot of pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money, by this word innovation, instead of helping people have, affordable medicines, So anyway, that's a whole other thing. But we talk about this word innovation, and I guess, I would say that piece, it came from it was inspired by many traditional elements, and that I honor, and that I, of course, credit in all my liner notes. And so, but, and I'll right now share the main inspiration, which is East Coast shaman music from Korea. And this is a beautiful music that when I was in Korea studying pansori, which is a different tradition, that's a vocal epic storytelling tradition. I was able to, it was so very lucky. Again, so many beautiful stories. I was able to meet Simon Barker, who is a great jazz drummer from Australia. I don't know if you've ever heard of him,
No,
but
I
he's
don't know.
fabulous. And before I met him, before I even went to Korea, I had seen, I think it was around the time when I went to East Timor, 2010, I had seen the documentary called Intangible Asset Number 82, which I highly recommend, directed by Emma France, whom I know, and who's great also. And actually, she did recently a documentary on Bill Frisell, which was, I think, shown in, when did that come out? I want to say before the pandemic, maybe 2018 or so. But so Emma, I hadn't met Emma yet.
I think I saw that doc. It's also
Yes.
Mike Gibbs is also in there, right?
Oh, really? Yeah, I only saw that once, so I can't
Okay.
remember if Mike Gibbs was in it. But
Yeah. Getting
no,
back to your
intangible.
story.
Yeah, so intangible asset number 82 was centered on Simon's journey to Korea, where he is looking for this master drummer named Kim Sok-chul, who was this intangible asset number 82. So in Korea, and I think in some other countries, I think it's people are given this title of being an intangible asset holder of a certain art form, because it's intangible, so it's an art form, and so this, I think it's UNESCO who does it. I hope I'm right. We have to look that up, but it's so, but it can also, I think, be in handcrafts and in music and in dance. And so this shaman drummer, I think Simon had heard recordings of him and just tried to transcribe it on the drums, just like, from just orally. And so he goes on this journey to try to actually meet this drummer. And so, so in that documentary, you'll see this family featured. And I think when I was in Korea learning pansori at the time, Simon was performing, and I got to speak with him after the performance, and he had already heard of me, or he had already heard me sing, because I think he heard records of Steve Coleman's. And so we got to talking, and we kept in touch. And then I think a couple of weeks later or something, he happened to be in Busan, which is in southern part of Korea, where he was going to go see one of these rituals of the East Coast shaman music and of this particular family. And of course, Kim Sok-chul passed away already, which they document in this film. But the family is still so strong in their tradition, and his three daughters are still performing and are still, leading and singing and organizing all these rituals. And so I got to go. I met him there, or I think we rode together there, but then he had to leave, and I stayed. I didn't even know how I was going to leave, get out of there, or where I was going. I'm staying. And there happened to be some other friends of his, from a percussionist group, I think from Australia. So we were all there, and just kind of blown away by this ritual. And the ritual is like, it's a village ritual. It's to, basically, the family is hired to conduct and perform these rituals in villages where, they want to have a great harvest. They want to have a bountiful, they want to have many fish. They just want prosperity, basically. And so they'll, this ritual will be performed, and the community, they make a big tent, and everyone gathers in the tent. And the whole ritual, it's many rituals within the one big ritual. And you just have to go and experience it. But there must be, very close with Buddhism, because there are a lot of the flowers and the paper, paper kind of props that I think they make, or someone makes them by hand, and they're all there, and they're fish, a huge platter of fish that they dance with, and then they have this knife with a tassel on it that they stab it, in the dance, to show that we're going to have a great harvest and many fish. And in the communities involved, they're dancing on stage, and they, it's just incredible. And so we were at a 24-hour, I think we were attending a 24-hour ritual. So it was all night, and we stayed up all night. And, most of the villagers, they would go back to their houses and go to sleep. But the shaman drummers and singers would keep going. So they would tag team, of course. It's a big family. Yeah. So they would tag team, but still it went on all night. And often, because I went to many of their rituals, I followed them. I started learning the singing from one of the young women, who was she's now married to the son of one of those three sisters, one of the three daughters of this shaman drummer, Kim Sok-chul. Her name is Kim Dong-on. And her daughter-in-law, whom I became friends with and studied with, her name is Sol Hanna, and she spoke some English, so that's why, I could ask her questions and she would explain some things. And but so I followed them. I went to many of their rituals and recorded. They let me record and learn. And actually, they would invite me up to sing pansori in the middle of the ceremony because they thought it was so cool. And it was entertainment for the whole village. So they would say, 미국 사람, Jen Shyu, like this American person, 판소리를 할 거예요, like pansori, she will do pansori. So very sweet. And anyway, so that music, I composed that piece in homage of the rhythmic structure. So I followed the rhythmic structure. I start out, I sing the traditional melody that Sol Hanna taught me, but then I was experimenting with different language. So as you might hear, like I start with a verse of Korean, and then I go into Tetunwe Hali, which the text is from an epic story about this legend named Atibatik. And the legend is a Timorese. At the time, it was before colonization. So it was a Timorese story about this warrior named Atibatik. But she had many names. But Ho'ar Naha Samane Oan was her full name. And what it means is basically inside of the name has the phrase like is like a man. Ho'ar Naha Samane On is like a man, because she dresses as a man in the story to save her brothers, because her brothers are captured by a rival king because they lost in a cockfighting in a gambling match. And so when she learns that they are, I guess, captured and held captive by this rival king, she decides to go and save them, but she has to dress as a man so that she can fool this rival king and actually do cockfighting with him. And she beats him every time, so she wins her brothers back. And anyway, it's an incredible story. And the reason why I connected it to this folkloric figure named Bari Degi from Korea is because when I was on, one of my return trips to Korea, let's see, but that must have been 2015. So 2013 was my first time studying pansori in Korea. And that was just a very lucky thing. And I will explain this story. But I was in Indonesia at the time doing my Fulbright. And actually went beyond my Fulbright. I stayed longer. I kept renewing my visa because I was at the time learning Javanese singing and dance, the song and dance traditions. So the singing is called sindenan, and this is an improvisational way of singing. It's so much. There's so many links to jazz to me, just coming from that perspective. But and the links are, of course, it's a totally different tuning. So you'll have like traheng nota yomas. So the scale is like da ba da 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 da. So it's like different. That's one mode. They call slendro. Bo bo da 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 da. And whereas, and they have a whole different gamelan. They have all different instruments for a mode called pelog. And so that would be bo da 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a more familiar one. Yeah, that's more.
But the one
popular.
before sounded like a minor pentatonic.
It did, but it was da da, like that da da. It's like between whole step and minor third.
I see. Yeah.
But yes, if I went da da, that would be, But this is more like da 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 ba da. And in fact, one of the modes, they'll drop it down. They would call it slendro limo, which is 5. So da, they would start here, da 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 da. So then it's like, what? But it should be that the octave is split into 5 equal tones. But of course, as a Western, coming from Western, I kind of just leaned on some crutches, like, okay, just to maneuver through this music at the beginning, I'm just going to pretend that 6 is the tonic, because they have numbers.
Yeah.
So they have like 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So that would be, of course, I think I'm a little low for a normal gamelan, but not all gamelans are the same tuning. But I think I should go higher, like I think da is it's a little higher. So 6, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Da da da. Yeah. So anyway, it's very amazing, and it's similar in that you have to, for instance, you have to learn, like, almost, it's in a very similar way. Like when I was transcribing Charlie Parker, it was the same process. Like, I'm just going to copy exactly how he went through this harmony,
Yeah.
And then I'll just do more and more. And then, and eventually you find your way to go through a certain tonality in your own way. But you've internalized these patterns, right? And the way of voice leading and all that. So in Sindanon, it's very similar. So when I first started learning from my teacher, she said, just learn the way I do it. Like this one time, but then she'll, like, if she does it another time, she'll change it. Not intentionally, but she's so embedded in the tradition that
she can
it's improvisational. It's an improvisational tradition. So you don't do it the same every time, so if, for instance, like nota, so she could go, I mean, that's one way, that's a way, I think that's like the first way that she taught me. But then she could go like nota, so it's very much simpler. Or she go let's see, what's another way? Wait, what she could, mean, that's not conventional at all, but like there's so many ways. Or traheng no to. So that's another way. And it's because as long as you're trying to get to this note, the two.
Yeah.
Da.
Okay.
So it's all about, so instead of harmony and going through a harmony, they have a destination. And they call that sele. Yeah, it's like the end. It's like you're doing the, like, what if it's like there's a certain way to do this phrase if you're going to two, if you're going to da, that note.
Yeah.
And so like you have to learn all these ways to get to that note. And then trahing no to, it's 4 syllables. But there are also 8 syllable lines. And then that's a whole other thing, So for instance,
but does
yeah.
8 syllable lines, does it also give you more notes?
It gives, yes, it's more notes.
Pitches.
It is more pitches, yes. So for instance, like I'm gonna do like jarwo, purwo, tungal, basane, baskoro. So I'll do like going to 2, tunga basane baskoro. Right. So that's 8 syllables. Tunga basane baskoro. Yeah, that's going to 6. See, so but tunga, although tunga basane baskoro. So that's like one way for that 8 syllables to go to 2. That's how you would. That's one main way. That's one popular way to go to 2. So
her way of showing you this was like, do as I do. Like she would sing it, and then you would have to copy it.
Right, but but this is all in the context of a piece,
of a story.
So like,
also.
Yeah, well, no, a piece like it'd be almost like what would they call it? This one is ladrang. This one they call a ladrang. Ladrang is usually like a shorter piece, you could say. But like gunding is like gonna be longer. I don't know. There's so many. I'm still learning this stuff. It's like a lifetime. It's like when you start learning the tradition. For anyone who says like, oh yeah, I know what it's all about, like, no, you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Once you start, you realize this is like a drop in the ocean.
Like that's something that I really want to talk to you about. It's like the way you deal with so many traditions at the same time. That's overwhelming for me. Because
for me too. It's not easy.
if we think about somebody like I don't know, maybe let's say Shirley Horn. She was trained classically as a pianist,
right.
But her main thing was jazz and tunes, singing, and that's one tradition which she worked on her whole life, and in a way perfected. But I don't want to use that word so much, but like in a way, like it's amazing what she did with it.
Yep.
And she didn't go to other kinds of traditions and incorporate so much of that. She was just about singing those tunes and comping for herself and and for others.
Right.
But doing that with multiple things in one life is like, how do you balance that? Because whenever I hear you, when I hear you sing standards with Kenny Werner, or going into all these kinds of different traditions, like it doesn't sound like scratching the surface, although I don't know really a lot about these traditions,
right.
But how do you balance that?
Yeah. Well, I think, it's not doing multiple, it's not for everybody. It's, and I don't think it's, just as, because I teach a lot too. and just as one of my, well, actually Steve had told me, like, you can't be a jack of all trades, you have to just do one thing, and and my piano teacher said the same thing. He was like, because at one time I think I had to choose between doing a musical and a piano competition, and I wanted to do both, and he's like, you can't do it, you can't be a jack of all trades. And that was like frustrating. I remember having this like childhood crisis, because I was like, but I want to do everything, and crying and everything. It was a big like saga in the household, and eventually I had to, I had to choose the piano competition, just because.
Is it the one that I saw the video from, the Tchaikovsky?
It was a different one. Yeah, that was the one. That was one of them. Thank you.
That was impressive.
That was a result of one of the piano competitions that I had won. But no, the one that I was applying, or trying for, was called the Stravinsky International Piano Competition. I never won that one, but I did get 6th place when I was a youngster, and then when I was older, at that time I made the finals.
Right.
It's very, we're talking about like these little kids from Russia and China, playing you out of the water kind of thing. So I was proud to be a finalist. But, so for some people, like, focusing on one thing is the path for them,
Yeah.
But what I realized, and maybe it's my own curiosity or my own obsession with languages and other vocal traditions and dance traditions, like, I just want to experience more, and I have a capacity for it. So it's like, well, if I have this capacity for it, why not take advantage of it? And
the thing is, I think, sorry for interrupting, but I think a lot of people actually do have multiple obsessions going on at the same time,
right.
But not all of them are in music. If we're talking about musicians, like, there might be somebody who's like all about playing standards,
right,
and like going down that rabbit hole, and going fishing and knowing everything about fishing and stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
that's true.
Or being like a super nerd about this one TV show and knows everybody, like knows everything about that show.
Yeah, that's true. And
but it's rare.
I'm a skater too. I do inline skating.
Yeah.
Recently, that was a recent gift from an ex-boyfriend,
Yeah, I see.
But, so yeah, that became an obsession in some ways.
It's that curiosity and that passion that leads us to all these different fields, I guess.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, for music, I think, I guess the thread for, vocal traditions is the voice. And I think what I'm so curious about are just how it works. Like, and it's more like, I just want to know how that feels, so pansori, I fell in love when I heard it. I fell in love with it, and I, cause it was powerful. It was guttural. It was rich. And maybe it was also because I was, I had, maybe I was at that time a little tired of the kind of whiny, thin voice that, a lot of popular singers had. Or maybe I was like going against that. So I was like, I want to, express in a more robust way, you know? And so when I heard Pansori, which I think was 2000, I think it was a 2010 when it was on. I first heard it, and I heard it in movies, actually, in these films of Im Kwon-taek, a famous Korean filmmaker, and I really have to thank oh my gosh, my brain, a West Coast guitarist. Why am I forgetting his name? Henry Kaiser. Oh my goodness. So I was hanging out with him, and I was sharing some of my field work from East Timor with him. And he said, "Oh, have you checked out these movies? They are all about this thing called pansori, and I think you'd really love it." And so I watched them, and one of them, the one that I really loved, was called Sopyeonje. And the story actually was, if you knew the epic story called Shimtonga, which is one of these famous epic pansori epics that is still sung today, which I think in total, if you sing the whole thing, it's like 5 or 6 hours.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, but usually, and even historically, they would just sing like a little section of it, and perform, whether it be in the street, at a market, they would just perform a little section, like a little sub story, of the larger story. And when it's sung in full, that's actually almost a modern phenomenon, because now they have these like sori festivals, and or they'll perform at like the National Theater of Korea. I saw many where they like did this, where they would perform the whole thing. And but then I've been told that traditionally they would just sing them actually in these little sections. So when I heard it, I started, it planted the seed of someday I'm going to go to Korea and learn this tradition. And I had already been to Taiwan. I'd already been to Timor. I mean, in terms of like, I had already started those journeys of going back and coming back, it's always going back and back again, it's never just once. But with Korea, I was like, I really have to go there and start learning Korean and also this vocal tradition. And but then I got this Fulbright to go to Indonesia to study Javanese singing and later dance. The dance I didn't actually intend to learn, but when I saw it, when I got there, I thought I have to learn. So then I began to learn both, and then found out about a tradition where they called ledean, where they sing and they dance. They're improvising sindenan, which is an improvisational vocal tradition, and they're dancing. So when I learned about that tradition, then I pursued that when I was there. And meanwhile, this dream of going to Korea was floating. The seed had been planted. And I kept extending my visa in Indonesia to stay in Java because I wasn't done learning yet. And it's funny, I got that's when you get the most gig offers, is when you're out doing your own research.
Yeah.
And that's when people start asking you, oh, can you do this big festival? And you have to say, no, I can't, but then, I got this
That's
offer.
Not easy.
I know. Yeah. It takes strength to say no, and just trust that the opportunity will still be there. But the courage to say, no, I'm still pursuing this dream. I'm digging deeper, so I've definitely, having now done that, I just do that now without hesitation. But because the Jim Staley, who's the artistic director at Roulette, he had offered me a commission and residency when I was still in Indonesia. And he's like, oh, can you come back and, do this? And I said, no, I can't. I'm not ready yet. I mean, I'm still out here learning, so I'm going to say no. And then he actually offered it to me the next year. And then, at which case, I think I was in Korea by that time. And I thought, I think I'll be ready to come back by next year. And so I said yes. And that led to my first solo piece in 2014 called Solo Write 7 Breaths, which was a culmination of all those years out. I felt it was like culmination of Taiwan through China, through East Timor, through Indonesia, through Korea. And but the way I found out about how to learn this amazing tradition of pansori was after. So my Fulbright had run out. The funds were no longer coming in, but I had a lot of savings because it was so cheap there. I didn't spend all the money that they were that Fulbright gave me. So I was using up my savings, and then I went to my dance teacher. One of my dance teacher, her name was Sutia, Bu Sutia, and I was just helping out at her concert. I was just supporting her and just being there, and sometimes passing out programs, and then I met this dancer who was her late husband's student. he was American Hawaiian, kind of Chinese American Hawaiian, and his name's Garrett Cam. And so we got to talking, and he was there to perform, but also because it was kind of, I think there was like a conference. It was like a conference and dance performance. Like there were some papers being given, some presentations, some talks, as well as this dance performance in the span of a few days. So he was there. He lived in Bali at the time. He still lives in Bali, but had studied Javanese dance for many years, 20 years or something, by the time I was there. And so he had, many times performed at the Keraton, which is the palace in Yogyakarta, where I got to perform twice, actually. So he was telling me, yeah, I've been studying Javanese dance, but I also, went to Korea and I studied some Korean dance out there. And there's a program that you can do. I'm like, really?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, really? And so, I asked him about what the program was, and he said, oh, there's this place called National Gugak Center. So Gugak is traditional music, is the name they use for all traditional music in Korea. So Gugak, that's just what they say. Instead of saying like traditional music, they just call it Gugak. So, and it encompasses all these traditional arts. And I guess the dances, it also encompasses dance, but they have specific names for dance, certain dances and dance traditions. So, but then the music is what accompanies that dance. So anyway, he told me about it, and I grabbed the opportunity. I said, well, can you connect me with the person in charge of that program you did? And so he gave me the email, and I emailed them, and they weren't really responsive, but once I got a response, I just kept emailing them. And, and then they said, actually, we have a program. He said, there's a 6-month program that National Gugak Center is part of, and it's called a Cultural Partnership Initiative. And it's actually for, people, scholars, and even sports people, because it was funded by the Ministry of Culture, Sports, Culture, and Tourism is what the governmental entity that supported this scholarship. And so the scholarship invited scholars, artists, and just professionals from developing nations, not developed, technically not from America, not from Japan, not from Australia, but rather, Eastern European countries, African countries, Southeast Asian countries. So Indonesia was one of these countries that they were welcoming applications from. And since I was there, that's where I applied from. Yeah. And so they really made an exception for me because I am American. They made an exception I became a Timorese citizen in 2014, also dual citizen. But at the time it was 2013, so I was American, and they just made an exception for me because I was so passionate. And the person who is a friend of mine now, who runs the program, he said, well, obviously you had all this experience, and we knew that you were going to, their purpose, of course, is to promote Korean culture. That is the purpose of this scholarship. And so he said, we knew that you would be very well, promoting the whatever you learn. So they just took me, they accepted me, and they said, and they only accepted 3 artists to learn and take lessons, and I really made my own lesson plan. I chose a teacher who was younger than me, actually, and I actually was connected to her from an Indonesian artist who I helped. Anyway, it's a lot. He's actually the subject of Song of Silver Geese. He was a friend of mine who was a brilliant wayang, shadow puppetry young master. He was only 30 years old. And he did a program called One Beat, which I helped him apply for. And he got in, and it was it's a program that the State Department funds and supports. I think their fiscal sponsor is Bang on a Can, the Bang on a Can All Stars. And, but it's a beautiful program of musical exchange, so the State Department every year has a list of countries that they want to build better relations with. And so they welcome this program, like welcomes musicians from those countries to come. And it's like a cultural diplomacy endeavor. And I think Hillary Clinton started it. And so when they began, I think their first year was 2012, they asked me, because I was friends with the folks who founded the organization. They asked, can you tell us if there are any interesting Indonesian artists, and so I kind of recruited, I kind of met these artists and encouraged them to apply. And so he was one of them, and he got in the first cohort of their program, and he was like a star, and so there he met these two Korean musicians who were also invited into that program. And they are Kwon Song-hee, who then became my pansori teacher, and then Park Kyung-so, who is a gayageum player. Mm-hmm. So I got to meet, of course, when I went to Korea, I got in touch with them, and I asked Kwon Song-hee if she could be my main teacher. And then this scholarship funded the lessons, So, and then Park Kyung-so, I just became great friends with. And now I'm sadly, my friend Joko, who was the puppeteer and gamelan musician, he was killed in a car crash in 2014, and along with his wife and their baby son, who was only 10 months old at the time. And so that, it was devastating. And we had so many plans to collaborate, because my Fulbright was finished. I was going to go back to the US, and he was already performing in Germany and really spreading the art form of wayang kulit, which is that's the puppetry, shadow puppetry of Java. And yeah, I mean, he was so talented and interested in jazz and other traditions of music around the world. And so actually, look, I have these, so he gave me these, he left me with these beautiful puppets. And so can you see them?
Yeah.
He left me with these. And of course, he showed me like a few things of how to move their arms, but it's such a tragedy, that he's gone. And such a beautiful family. And so I'm very close still with his parents and his sister and brother, and yeah, but Joko. So I wrote Song of Silver Geese for him. It began as a ritual, and then I developed it with Satoshi Haga, a dancer, and we created the piece together. And the whole thing is a ritual for his family, really. And
beautiful.
Yeah, but so Song of Baridegi, it goes back to, I mean, so the program in Korea, I got in, and was able to stay there for 6 months, learning Korean language, learning pansori. I started to learn gayageum, which is a 12-string zither. And then I started learning East Coast shaman singing.
Is that the zither that you played Heartbeat on?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Do you have it close by? Do you have it near?
I have it close by. I can open it. Do you want me to open
nice.
it? Okay, so give me 1 second. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
what is the tuning, the traditional tuning of it?
Yeah, traditional tuning is, again, it's not pitch specific. It's more it's more relative. So whatever the bottom note is, I like to tune it to A flat, just because when I sing, that's the best range for me to sing.
I tried to transcribe the song today.
Oh my God.
After listening to it for so long.
So many times.
Yeah. It's really so beautiful.
Yeah. So here it is. But right now it's tuned in a very crazy 12-tone tuning because I was improvising with a Reggie Workman right after I came back from I did a gig. Oh no, well actually, oh yes, because I didn't bring it to DC, but so hold on, let me just lay this out. So I don't know if it's in the heartbeat. I can do something traditional though. Oh yeah, this is all crazy.
Could you even move the camera a little bit so we can see it?
Yeah. So here it is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is all kind of crazy. Let me find a tuning. So yeah, so the relationship between the notes is more what I can tell you. So let me see here. Here's the tuning. A flat. I don't have perfect pitch. Da. So here we go. Not too far. So it's kind of pentatonic. And heartbeat is not traditional tuning.
Yeah.
I changed it around. Okay, let's see here. Oops, that was not right.
But on heartbeat, the lowest note is a G, right?
Yes, exactly. And heartbeat came out of a tuning that I happened to be in. So there's,
Was
I didn't
it
plan
kind of an
the
accident?
tuning.
Happy accident?
Yes, happy. Yes. There we go. Yeah, so this is the traditional tuning. So you have this is that true? It seems so high. Hold on. Oops. Oh my gosh. I did A sharp. It should be A flat. G. Oh no, that's correct. No, it's correct. It's correct. It just seemed high to me. Yeah, so yeah. So this is something traditional. It's a folk song called Yukjabegi. Yeah, so it'd be Sahani iro kuna he 백토르 다시 나도 되는 아니시으리이라. Yeah, I guess I could have given you that angle. Yeah.
I closed my eyes just now because I was.
But yeah, my voice is going to be way hotter than the gayageum because we don't have it mic'd. But
yeah, I could hear it.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But
yeah. So this is again, I didn't go intending to learn gayageum, but when I got there, it was offered to me.
Can you tell me more about when you wrote Heartbeat? What's the story behind it, and what was your process?
Well, I wrote it I'm working on this piece, this current project called Fertile Land, Fertile Body. And it's about the relationship between our, human fertility and the land. So the fertility of the land in relation to our own fertility. And and what we're realizing. And I just, it's kind of out there now, but microplastics have now been found in the sperm of people, of men. And who knows, like, is that affecting our fertility? Is that why fertility rates are low? So, so now all of this data is coming through. And I think there's still research being done, but it's kind of, it's kind of hard to test over time, but yeah, so I have a lot of research to do, but I'm trying to kind of express in an artistic way, in the form of a small orchestra, but everyone is a singer, so they will also be the choir. They won't be separate. They will be the same. So they'll be playing and singing, sometimes as soloists, as a choir. They will also be dancing, and the cast I envision are going to be all women and non-binary people, and so that is kind of what I'm seeing. But I'm also going to bring in my own personal journey with fertility, which it's funny because if my mom were alive now, she'd be like, "Don't talk about that stuff. It's personal," She was always, both my parents were like, "Don't talk about politics and don't talk about your personal life." And that's all I do now.
Well, it's also in your music. Like,
yeah.
There's this, what is it, Body of Tears?
Yeah, that's a true breakup.
Kind of...
That was a breakup song. Yeah. And in there, I also talk about my father's passing.
Exactly. There's the email that you I got. Read out.
Yeah, I sing it out because
wow.
That was a very, I think all of us, when we find out a loved one dies, it's through a medium that can be very detached,
not appropriate in a way.
Not appropriate. Yeah. Exactly. Because we are in, we're everywhere, we're in this global. I couldn't be with my parents at that time. I had this fellowship to Japan. I was doing my thing, and my dad passed so unexpectedly. He seemed to be doing well, and he was only 78, and was really taking care of my mom, who was the more fragile one. But and he was just in this chair, taking, doing his usual reading in the garage. And he did smoke like 3 cigarettes a day. That was a habit we couldn't get him to stop. And but he used to say, like, I don't drink, just give me this one thing that I can do. It's like, I don't drink, I don't do anything else, just give me this one thing. So but I think that the cause of death ended up being coronary artery disease was the ultimate cause of death. But we think he had a heart attack. But Mom said he looked like he was taking a nap. And because he had his hands nicely folded, in his chair, and he was, and she kept kind of replaying, because it was kind of before dinner. Mom had just finished cooking and went to wake him, to come to dinner, and he wouldn't wake up. And she said he must have, and she was trying to reassure herself. She said he must have had a heart attack when he was asleep, because otherwise he would have been laid out, struggling to get to the door or something. But instead,
and you also see it in the face and facial expression, of the dead body sometimes.
Right. Oof.
If something like this happens, but if it's peaceful,
right,
maybe it's a different thing.
Yeah. So that was so. So the whole experience, like in my show, actually, I just performed it in Washington D.C. just this past last Thursday, and it's very, it's a heavy piece, but I hope it's a hopeful piece too. And I bring into it all the things that we don't like to talk about in death, so there's the discovery there, the email comes down, and I was very far away, and I actually portray my mother as she finds him. Wow. Just like a normal day, and I have a pot. Actually, it's here, this beautiful pot, and it has a great sound. It sounds like a Chinese gong, which is wonderful. And so I just, use this, because mom actually, what happened was she finished cooking. She went into the garage. She's like, come on, wake up, and then he didn't wake up. And so she brought a pot out and like started hitting it to try to wake him up.
Isn't that in the song also?
Yeah. The baying of pot. Yes, there's a lyric on Zero Grasses. Yeah. So I connected that real life experience with Zhuangzi, because Zhuangzi is a Chinese philosopher who that was my dad's favorite. He was a poet, philosopher, and poet. Less known than Lao Tzu, but Zhuangzi was a very clever poet. So I brought that experience because I'd read a proverb of his, a story, a long time ago. This is like, I would say 15 years ago, in a book of Zhuangzi sayings, talking about, it begins with it's a parable. It begins with, this man, he's banging his pot, and banging his tub, I think. And then in the story, it's his banging because his wife had just passed. He's banging his tub, he's wailing, he's like this. And then Zhuangzi comes along. So in the song, I call it the sage, so Zhuangzi comes along and he says, what are you making all this noise for? And he's like, my wife just died. And then Zhuangzi says, yes, but this is the cycle of life. And if you do not understand, you know what? I had the lyrics. Let's see here. I think this song is called Father Slipped into Eternal Dream. I think that's what you're talking about. But the parable, let's see here. I think it happens toward the end.
Somehow that seemed familiar.
Zhuangzi, so. Yep. Zhuangzi parable adapted by Jen. So the sages, so I change it a little bit. So it's really the sage's wife slipped into eternal dream. So her friend flew to her to comfort her and found the sage sitting on the ground, banging an overturned pot with a spoon. That was my adaptation. In the real parable, it's a bathtub, singing with joy as loudly as she could. Her friend asked, how can you sing with joy now? Right. So the sage, I'm sorry, it's the sage. It's Zhuangzi. So the sage is the person who is, let's see. How can you sing with joy now? Right. I see. Yes. Singing with joy. Yeah. The sage is singing with joy. And the friend says, how can you sing with joy now? This man gave you life, watched you grow, but now has died in his sleep. Why do you not weep? And the sage says, my dear friend, of course I mourned at first, but upon reflection I understood. In the beginning, he had no life, no spirit, no body. But then he was given life, given a spirit, and given his body. Now things have changed again, and he is dead. He's joined the great cycle of seasons. Now he lies suspended between heaven and earth. Why then should I cry as though I don't know the cycle of strife? Therefore I stopped crying, and now I celebrate his life.
It's comforting.
Yeah. So I adapted the parable a bit, to fit my composition. But
Jen, what makes us listen to lyrics? What makes us pay? What makes us pay attention to lyrics? Because I can really pay attention to your lyrics.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case with me and singers.
Right. I was just talking with my partner about this, but I remember a friend of mine who's a great guitarist, Nelson Veras. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a
good friend of mine. I play with him. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So he's Brazilian, but lives in Paris now still.
Yeah.
Yeah. I miss him. I miss that guy. But I invited him to a gig of mine where I sang a lot of songs in Portuguese. I think one of them you like, the Ciudadagua. So I was like, so Nelson, what did you think? And he's like, oh, I never listened to the lyrics,
Yeah, that's very Nelson. Yeah.
It's like, oh, I always forget to, I'm just listening to the music, So yeah, I think, and actually this is very relevant to today, just today. I've been writing music, the political, basically, if you want to sing about politics or to bring that in, and when someone walks out, which someone did recently, well, walked out of a song I was singing, which had where I just turned it was a news report it was a little mini doc that Al Jazeera put out on a child of God. It was just like the war through a child's eyes, a child of Gaza, the war through a child's eyes. And I was so moved by it. And there was this young 9-year-old girl named Elaf who they just followed her. They just followed her. It's a 25-minute documentary on her family and just interviewing her and her, just kind of like it's basically kind of following her as she lived through these few days in the middle of the war. And this is back in December. They released this mini doc and this story like December 25th of last year. And so I, brought this piece, and it was like the first time I had tried it, and it was a work in progress performance. And not surprisingly, two guys walked out, two people walked out. And yeah, I mean, it just puts into question, because I've written many pieces, political songs, and people complained then too. One time I did a piece, it was for a Taiwanese Heritage Month. And I was invited to perform with my band, and one of these pieces was about the Chinese labor. It was actually had text, lyrics about the Chinese laborers in Cuba and how they were mistreated, and basically told the unknown history, the hidden history of Chinese who were brought over to Cuba to work on the sugar plantations. And this is, the time really between 1847 and 1874, at a time when African slavery was being abolished. And so the colonizers had to find more labor. They had to find, so they went to China. And, so I had this whole piece where I literally just musicalized, just improvised with melody, improvised the melody, but used the text of the Cuba Commission Report, the hidden history of the Chinese in Cuba. And it was like, you call them petitions. Like, it was just interviews that these officials had done, questioning them about the abuse that they suffered. And it was just like, it's on my Bandcamp, actually. It's the Chinese Cuban question, and some of the lyrics. I don't know if I can find them in my computer right now, but Li Chao Chun was whipped, and then they squeezed salt and lime juice into his wounds, and then like describing, it was just them testifying, basically describing what they experienced. And half of the Chinese died on the ships, which was common also when during the slave trade. And so yeah, so I was, so actually I performed this piece. So in that case, the presenter, she's like, oh, I don't think, we'd prefer you not to sing this piece, And I fought back. I said, this is my music, and it's already set, and we've already made the program, so I'm just going to do it. And another case when I did this piece was at the Lincoln Center atrium, and it was just part of their series, and apparently my ex-boyfriend who was there at the time, he he was then my partner, but he said he heard some lady complaining, saying like, this isn't a jazz concert, this is a protest. Yeah. I think she left too. So I feel like I think that's our job, and I just had a discussion with some artist friends today on a Zoom. That's our job. I mean, we don't always have to talk about sing about politics, or make art about politics. Like, we are already political by doing what we do, but in lyrics, a song that I do, and one thing I try to do is to, my way of being subversive is to have these lyrics and these stories in a form that is, my intent is it's in a form that's so beautiful that people cannot like stop listening.
Yeah.
So that's my method. It's not everyone's method, but I'm still experimenting with it, though.
You're saying the context is what makes us listening to or focus on the lyrics more, like how you present them.
Yeah. I mean, it really depends. I want people to listen and to hear the lyrics, to understand them. And so if it's something that's uncomfortable, if it's something that's not nice to hear, what can I do to make it listenable and like, I don't want to say it's trickery, but it's maybe it's a little magic, that, so one of the songs that also I think other people walked out on, this is what I'm told. It's a song that I it's called Song for Naldo, and you may, it's just lute and voice, and it's on my album.
It's on this one,
huh? Exactly. Yes. I think it's the only solo piece on the album. I think the rest is with the band, but and the lyrics are, first, it's very beautiful, very inspired by Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan kind of sing-songy, and at first it starts out about this writer who wrote, actually, he's my dear friend Naldo Ray. He's an East Timorese writer who wrote a book called Resistance, A Childhood Fighting for East Timor. And because he was born the same year as the invasion, the Indonesian invasion in Timor, and that was 1975. And so the song is about me reading his book and falling asleep, while I was reading, and then having this nightmare about my mother as I was reading. And so the song, the lyrics follow this thread, and then I describe in the song, I describe the dream, and then it's this crazy dream where my mom, like, they pressed my mom's face into this plate which had spikes in it, and then I somehow tried to I used some ice to try to heal her, like to make her skin feel better. It was this crazy dream, and then I say, I thought she had died, but no, she survived to sing the Timorese woman's sorrow. And then it goes, and then the next verse is about, is again directly from a legal document. And this report is a commission report also, but this time it's called Chega, and Chega means enough in Portuguese, and I think it's basically just all the reports they were trying to gather from women who, well, women, not just women, but like people who, you know, the experience in the war and how they were tortured and treated. And so there, you know, I think on the album I didn't have all the verses. I wonder if I had kept one of the verses, but you know, very graphic. And I remember when I was writing the piece, actually, I'm going to tell you, luckily I was at the Yaddo residency in upstate New York. And here we go. I saw the forceful harvest of sacred hairs. Originally in the report, it's pubic hairs. So, and I sang it as that, and my friend was listening. She's a great poet named Katie Peterson. And so I sang this kind of, hey, what do you think kind of thing. And I had that, you know, I saw the forceful harvest of originally pubic hairs in front of male soldiers. I changed it to before male soldiers. And then it was exactly, I saw the rape of pregnant women, including once when a woman was raped the day before she gave birth. And that was in the report. And then I added this, to a child of this troubled earth. So added a little poetic, you know, aspect. But there were another verse, which I guess I didn't record it, was I saw them throw us into tanks of water, our heads submerged eternally. I think eternally I added, our heads submerged. They even use a snake to instill terror. I think that's literal. That was literally from them. And then, and the threats to us that our children would be killed or tortured if we resisted. So that was in the report. And then couldn't, let's see. Oh God, let's see. Couldn't count the multitude of men. Couldn't count the multitude of men. Counting wouldn't do any good again. So, couldn't count the multitude of men. I wonder if that may have been in the commission report. And then I added, counting wouldn't do any good again. I think I added that to rhyme. So, you know, there were, and one of the verses was like, and maybe you should put a warning on this interview, like graphic. I saw let's see, something about including insertion of foreign things into our bodies' hollows. So they were just putting things in women's bodies, you know, and so I think instead of the vagina word, I changed it to into our bodies' hollows. So I softened it, you know, made it a little softer. And this was advice by my poet friend. She's like, Jen, if you want people to listen, you're going to have to make it a little softer, you know,
I see.
So they can listen and at least get the message. So, so all of that, this is what we negotiate as artists who use words.
Incredible.
You know, so that's why I try to go there. There's a fine line, you know. You know, even the word raped. I think maybe I did perform this for a class, a school, and I think I did change rape to a different word. I saw the what did I use? I can't remember now. They could hear before me as soldiers. I saw what did I use? I think I used something else though, because it was kids, you know.
Yeah.
Although recently I sang at a high school and they said it was okay. So I don't know. But in a way, like, do they really, if they don't understand it, they won't understand it. Like if I'm singing it, you know, it's kind of like when you bring your kid and there happens to be a scene on the movie screen. You're like, oh, did they understand that?
Yeah.
Or like
exactly.
some words that are said. Anyway, yeah, lyrics are, I mean, it's a constant. I'm navigating that world every day. As an artist. So heartbeat, you asked about heartbeat. I'm not answering your question. So that was a poem I wrote for my friend who is trying to get pregnant. And we trade stories, had traded stories. I'm on taking a break right now, but she's still trying, and she actually got pregnant, like suddenly and very surprisingly, which is beautiful. So I wrote this song as encouragement, so I called it
Oh,
Heartbeat, what was it? Faintly now I feel you here,
yeah.
softly steady. Um, yeah, so I need not fear, um, longing ready, no room for doubt as my body grows warm with you. And then undulating vibratory nuances in feeding you. See, you are the hub, the seed from which I sing. So it's like I'm just like
Yeah.
trying to encourage the seed to grow,
Mm-hmm.
May you someday feel the ocean wind against your skin. And I just imagined, this child, the mother singing to her child to be,
Yeah.
may you picturing this child walking on the beach, and then beyond my body, you've
Mm-hmm.
gone beyond my body, and then beyond my body, uh, walking on sandy shores and feeling beneath your feet each grain of sand, um, and then free of all pain. And because
Yeah.
she went through some painful, attempts, and a lot of women, myself included, have suffered miscarriage, and what
Mm-hmm.
that means. So that's where that phrase beyond, free from all pain comes from.
Yeah.
And yeah, so anyway.
Wow. Thanks for
So
sharing that.
that will be part of, for the piece, the new piece, Fertile Land, Fertile Body. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's the thing also. I don't know what it is going to be yet, but I'm going to be working on it when I'm in Rome, because I got this
Mm-hmm.
Rome Prize fellowship, and I get to really focus on that piece. And
Oh, great.
I have many beautiful musician friends in Italy that I'll do some works in progress with them and have them read music that I generate. But yeah, that piece is really, again, I think I guess I gravitate towards subject matters that are not usually talked about.
Publicly and also in music,
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved, so I'm going to take this scientific research and put it in music. And, even in my show, Zero Grasses, the theatrical show, of course, it's not on the album, but there is a scene where it's just purely me as the fertility doctor that I first
Mm.
saw, and where he was eating a sandwich during our consultation. And
Okay. Wow.
which is so crazy at the time, and
Mm-hmm.
absurd, but it really happened. And what's funny is that, well, I mean, I don't, I actually spoke with a doctor recently, just in April. I was visiting my partner, who was at the Bellagio residency, the Rockefeller beautiful villa, and it's a residency where professionals from different disciplines come and they work on their
Mm-hmm.
project, and they have this exchange. So he was doing that residency, and he invited me to join him. And I met this doctor in one of these gatherings. They had like a convening, and then we all had dinner together. And these were uh, experts. I think there were doctors there, there were environmentalists, and because part of Rockefeller's mission is to is environmental research, and their focus is climate change and everything. And So I spoke with him and I told him about the story about the fertility doctor. And I said, have you ever heard of that? Have you done that before? And he's like, actually, yes, because we have hundreds of patients a day and there's no time to eat. So he has to slip it in when he can, when he can slip it in. And I felt a lot more like sympathy. I was like, oh, of course, so in a way it's funny. I think at the time I thought it was rude a little, but now hearing this doctor speak about it, I have a different perspective,
different view.
Different view. Like, oh, they're working so hard and they need to eat at some point, and just maybe just is it a systemic issue? Like we're not giving our doctors enough time to they have too many patients, or like we don't have enough, so it's not the doctor's fault, it's the system's fault. So anyway, yeah, that's the current project, and
very exciting.
Yeah,
looking forward to seeing or hearing something from that.
Yeah. So.
I was wondering, learning a new language versus learning music or getting into a certain tradition of music. What are the things that helped you get into or to get to know a new language that you can then that we can also take as pointers into learning a piece of music?
Yeah. Well, I think I touched upon one thing earlier where you really have to empty your cup, and really lose your ego. Because if you're learning, especially language, if you're learning from scratch, which when I learned Indonesian, it's so fresh in my mind, and it was such an amazing learning experience with Indonesian. And for me, as a model of how I want to learn, or how I learn languages now, from that time on is, and it was immersive. It was an immersion style teaching. So one-on-one, not in a class. It was one-on-one with a professional language teacher. And, you as the student, it's like, you are literally a baby, you're a baby.
Yeah.
Babies know nothing, right? And so it's like, aku, kamu, like saya, which is formal saya, and then anda, you, and it's literally that. And you just have to, the less ego you have, the more open you are, the emptier you are, the faster you're going to learn. My theory.
That reminds me something of the I have it here. Zen mind, beginner's mind.
Okay.
In that book, there's one sentence where it's like, if you're listening to a lecture of somebody, of a great teacher,
right,
you should listen without any kind of preconceived idea of who you are. Because any kind of, but this doesn't apply to me.
Exactly.
Thinking will make or will hinder your learning process.
Yeah.
You would not learn if you think about who you think you are in that moment.
Right. Exactly.
It just reminded me of that.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly it. And so I think that's you have to start there. If you're not there, then no matter what techniques you use or, tricks, they're not going to work. So you have to be willing also, because language it's multiple, it's reading, listening, and writing, and comprehension. So listening and comprehension are tied together. But all these three main things is, all of them are at play. So you have to practice speaking it, and you have to practice speaking it in a real context. So you're going to have to talk with, people. And, and so I think the biggest thing is, it's so embarrassing for people to sound stupid.
Yes.
And that is what prevents them from trying, so then it's going to be harder for them to learn language if they're not doing that. So you have to put yourself out there, and inevitably you're going to struggle, you're going to sound bad, your pronunciation is going to be weird, but you have to do that in order to learn the language, right? So that is, you have to be willing to be there. That's really hard for people. But tricks of the trade, and which I'll relate to music soon, because you asked that.
That already related to music. What
that
you just
already,
said.
yes.
We
that
have
already
to sound
related.
bad in the beginning.
Yeah, and also, and I think Sindaenan, I'm going to use Sindaenan as an example, because I feel like that's a tradition that it wasn't just about stylistically singing. Because even pansori was not, I didn't learn how to improvise. To like the way I was taught, like this is orally, like this is oral tradition, this is the way it's sung. But the art form itself, there's not like a system of improvisation, if you know what I mean. As there is in Sindaenan, and as there is in, not that there's a system. I shouldn't say there's a system, but there is a way, like you are meant to improvise, and with pansori, I mean, of course, I think the masters, they get to a point where they improvise. But I think not, well, I would say the drummers, there's that's a whole other thing. But I think vocal melody, I'd have to know that more. I'd have to ask my teacher, but she kind of sings it the same way every time. Because that's the way she's taught. And that but with Sindaenan, like there's a whole melodic, like there's this way of doing it, and there's this way of doing it, and there, it's like a whole. So when I learned that tradition, I actually did use a lot of my skills that I picked up through singing Black American music and jazz. And, for instance, just keeping this pulse and then being able to be free over this pulse, so it's like you have layers of, so that already, because with Steve, when I was starting to learn Steve's music, that was also starting from nothing and having to unlearn all the classical stuff, but like we had to learn really tricky kind of drum chants, right? And to be free in these very complex rhythmic structures. So just, being able to do that and not just sing exactly the structure, but to really be free, that actually helped me so much, because in this, like, so I'm hearing what this is, actually it's way slower. So these are like the, they call the balungan. It's like the gongs. There's a certain instrument that just plays this structure.
Yeah.
And it's called the slenthum. And then actually the other instruments are all dancing around, improvising off of that, but the slenthum is like the main, they'll be like, gung, 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 gung. And those numbers, my teacher will say, and all the teachers I studied with, like, oh yeah, you're going to start right there between those two numbers. So I'm hearing the dung, gung, gung, gung. And then, but like, you're going to go, oh, went back. Oh, this is all different tuning. It's all different. Oh, actually, it's coincidence. So something like that. So it's not exactly right, but that's the idea, is that like you have to end at a certain time in that structure and then begin at a certain time. And then after this end, like the ending, you actually have to end after that. And it's so complex. But yeah. So and it's like, oh, but the first thing when I started was like, oh my God, I'm focusing so much on this melody. I'm not even listening. Like, how do I have the capacity to listen to this thing? You know? Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, the more you get used to that melody and the way of singing and the words, you're going to be able to hear this, you know, underneath. And, and lo and behold, they were right, you know? Yeah. So it's so beautiful. So yeah, you really had to let go of, but then, you know, I was able to use those skills of, of being able to listen to multiple layers. And that's just that was an aspect of Steve's music and my own music also. And, so that really helped, because there were I remember another singer who came, she was struggling a lot, you know, and even though I think she I don't know if she had done maybe the classical, but she was asking me like, Jen, how are you doing this? You know? And I kept saying, like, you have to really let go, you know, of, and also I think she wanted to learn it. She wanted to go faster. She wanted the process of learning to go faster. I'm like, you have to, you can't rush it. You just can't rush it. And you just have to have patience. And yeah, but anyway, so in terms of language, I think the obvious is to listen to it all the time. Yeah. And to internalize, like I internalized, I copped, you know, so many different singers, of course, with my teachers, and because they also talked about the rasa. Rasa is feeling, and in Indonesian. And one of my teachers, he was a beautiful elder named Pak Darsono Gila. Gila means crazy. And they said, oh, don't say that. You should just say Pak Darsono Jepang. And Jepang means Japan, because his wife is Japanese. So they're like, it's not, you know, it's not nice to say crazy. You should just say Japan. So just, but he was an amazing teacher. And he was saying, like, the hardest thing in Sininan and in Javanese music is the rasa, the feeling, you know, because you have to, it's like, it's not easy to learn, you know, it's not easy to, you just have to absorb it. And yeah, I think that's another layer. He's like, yes, in language, there's reading, there's writing, there's speaking, but then there's also like the attitude, you know, and that's like a whole other unspoken thing. And I you know, and I would watch my teachers when they would sing, like, one of my teachers, Bungatira, she'd be very like, Pamintaku nimasitase. And like, just like her attitude, there's something about her shoulder movement and her head, you know. You know, there's just something about her attitude, and very like, and she also had missing teeth. And she would say, you have to be clear, like you have to sing very clearly. She's like, you're not singing clearly enough. She's like, I have no teeth and I'm still clearer than you. So yeah, gems
That's
of
beautiful.
wisdom. Yeah. Wow. She passed away, sadly, I think during the pandemic. So, yeah.
What does different languages, because in some tunes you switch around from one language to the other.
Yeah.
What does a different language, what kind of effect does it have on your voice and on the timbre of the voice?
Yeah. So that was Javanese singing. With pansori, for instance, it's very, they real singers, they get nodes. They purposely, my teacher would say broken voice. She's like, I have broken voice, but maybe you don't want to have broken voice. So she just said, so be careful, just be careful. And so I was trying to find a way to simulate that huskiness, and
How?
like just by squeezing my throat a little. So like, yay, 소맹이 아래이리다, and just allowing breath to get in there.
Yeah.
소맹이 아래이리다. So 소맹이 사업기란 황주도 화동이고 덥고 성면, it's just like, like getting the air in there. 그때요 심황후는 언간 영웅이 3년이 되었고, that's like the aniri, the talking. 신몽 사는 딸 생각이 it's like just I'm opening. 딸 생각에 어찌 울고 세월을 보냈던지 더욱 백수되었구나. 심황후 물으시되. So 심황후 is the princess. She says, 거주 성명이 무엇이며 초자. So like I can add the air. 초자이는 초자이는 God, I forgot all the words. 신봉사가 초자 말을 듣더니 눈에 yeah, so it's like letting the air in at the beginnings. 눈물이 뚝뚝뚝뚝 떨어지며, so and then but then for Javanese singing, it's very clear, no air, and my teacher would call it small voice, suara kecil, so small voice. So if I were to what's another I can continue that song. So 인사는 나서방인네 따뜻한 긴간 사람분 아또. So I'm like really trying to have no air. 아또 차끝 ingati yen chita tansamulat sitase. So yeah, it's very small. I'm trying not to allow any air, and it's small movements. So yeah. And I think the language is, it's funny because I remember when I was, I had many, many Javanese friends. Of course, they were also gamelan, training as gamelan musicians, and also learning, and what's beautiful, there's this beautiful, like, there's this non-hierarchy. Everyone's learning and teaching. It's like very seamless, which I love. And that's what actually my mentorship initiative, that's what I'm trying to instill, learning, teaching. There's no hierarchy. There's in our program in M3, which I have with Sara Serpa, it's everyone is a mentor. Everyone is a mutual mentor. So there's not mentee or mentor. Everyone is a mutual mentor. So anyway, so that's this beautiful. Friend of mine, he said, over time, like at the end, or, at the end of my time there, he said, Jen, your Sindanon is getting much better. It's because your Javanese language is better. Because I was studying privately Javanese language. And he said, yeah, your singing is getting better, and he generally called it the Sindanon, the singing art form it's getting better because your Javanese is getting better. So,
it's linked.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's such a character, and I speak Spanish and I sing, I actually started when I was before I started writing music, I was in a kind of a salsa group, and I was singing boleros and, dos gardenias para ti, con ella quiero decir, and I felt like, there was also a different way to sing in Spanish, also with some air,
Yeah.
And actually, I've just started learning cante for flamenco singing, and
Wow.
because I've actually, that's been a long time dream to learn the singing and the dance of flamenco.
Wow.
And so I'm actually going to a workshop in New Mexico, 2-week intensive, which I guess is a very renowned workshop. And it's a festival, so it's like learning all day, and then your teachers perform at night. So yeah, that's in June. So I'm going for 2 weeks at the end of June, and yeah, so we'll see. And again, it's like I love it so much. I just want to experience it. And
yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not too worried about, oh, how am I going to use it? I'm not worried about that yet.
But I'm curious, like we talked about you starting or doing standards and then kind of allowing your heritage and your curiosity for all that stuff to come out in your music.
Yeah.
So when you then sing standards now, how does it feel?
Yeah. Well, I mean, because I saw you comment on the Kenny Werner, We Did Embraceable You.
Yeah.
So I actually was I was singing in Indonesian in that version.
Exactly, yeah.
Because I heard a baby cry. And so I was talking about that. I was improvising in Indonesian. And it just happens that Indonesian right now is my best language, my best other than English. So it's very easy for me to
improvise it.
Yeah, to improvise in it. And I was improvising in Portuguese when that was strong, and in Mandarin sometimes I was improvising in Mandarin, but Indonesian, I lived there for almost 2 years, so and I was dreaming in Indonesian, and to me it's such a Malay. I mean, it's such a beautiful language, and very intuitive. Like, it was very easy to learn. I think some languages are going to be easier to learn than others, depending on who you are. So for some reason, my grandmother also, I found out when in 2014, my grandmother was born in technically Indonesia, because she was born in West Timor, what is now West Timor. And yeah, so I didn't know that until I was trying to get my citizenship in Timor. But my mother's mother was born in Kupang, which is in West Timor. But yeah, what was my train of thought? Oh yeah, standards. So
exactly, yeah, standards, and also the kinds of different traditions of singing that you've been studying and working on.
Yeah.
Like, how does it feel if you now go back and sing a standard?
Yeah.
Knowing all these things about how you can use your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the beautiful thing is there's so many, it's not just language. It's also the vocal, I don't want to say technique, but it's kind of like, I call it tracing the voice. Like, I wrote an essay in John Zorn's series. He has that beautiful series called Arcana. I think it's Musicians on Music. And he invited me to write an essay, I think in his sixth volume. And at the time, I was in Indonesia. It's like when I first got to Indonesia, and he was bothering me about like, Jen, can you write this essay? Can you finish? Like, hey, the deadline is this date. And at one point I told him like, John, I don't think I can do it because I'm too busy learning all this stuff in Java. He's like, oh, Jen, we can extend the deadline for you. I think it's really important that you write it. And I'm really glad that he pushed me. Because the title of the essay, I called it, Lelewo, which is a Javanese term for like copying exactly, like as a student, like you absorb exactly, you try to absorb exactly as you learned it. So it's like this, and so there's a term for it in Javanese. It's called Lelewo. And so the title of my essay was Lelewo. What do I call it? God, I have to look up the thing. It's Tales of a Voice and Bone Tracer. Stories or tales from a voice and bone tracer. So I kind of likened it to how visual artists, they put tracing paper over a painting, and then they, like, say it's a Picasso, they put tracing paper and then they just follow the lines. They're tracing the lines and try to get a feel for the technique, how does it feel in the hand? And so it's very similar. I really see it as the same thing. Like I'm tracing this person's voice, or if for dance, I'm like tracing the movement of the bones, and so that gets in there, aside from language. Like it's separate, so that's why I love to experiment with, can I retain the technique in a different language, which I did in Sangabari Degi, because it's like Hoarnaha samane oan lele ayonan, but my technique, hoarna na, that is still in the tradition of the East Coast shaman singing, but I'm singing it in Tetun Wehali. Hoarna samane oa oa. I can't remember the words now, but and then what else? What's the other one? Yeah. So I think I don't analyze it too much. Of course, now that I'm talking about it, I'm kind of breaking things apart. But I think the reason I love to dive in and kind of have all these, it's like tools. It's like tools of expression. It's like sometimes I want to, embrace me. Like sometimes that might, maybe that's how I feel,
Yeah.
My sweet embraceable you. And, and
the cool thing is, like, your voice has been to places, not places on earth, but also in your voice, in your, like, and also went like different routes in a way, which if you would just have studied like the jazz tradition only, like, which is a big, huge field in its own. But if you would only have done that, you wouldn't have access to those places, or to those combinations of ways in a way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just having more, because with it's the life experience. It's almost like the music and the learning has been an excuse for just living and being with other people in these different worlds, in these different cultures. And I have always maintained that it's about the people and about the relationships.
Yeah.
More so than even the craft itself that I'm there to research, And I think that, so that is what is important. Like, seeking out these elders, it's not for their knowledge. It's like, it's for being with them. That's the important thing. And having that relationship ongoing, is really so special. And, because I think if you're learning and researching, there's always the question of, and I get asked this a lot. They say, like, well, how have you managed to avoid, like, being accused of appropriation, And I said, well, it's, if you have the intent of, you're going to meet someone and to meet people and to kind of, just to focus on the relationship rather than the stuff that you're trying to learn. It's just not, it's not about getting something. It's about giving your attention to this amazing holder of, whatever this tradition is that you're seeking to learn about. And so it's, I think if you have that attitude, and of course, if you have the attitude of, I'm just going to learn a drop in the ocean, then you realize that I'm just learning and knowing that, oh, I learned this one thing, and that means that there's 10 more things to learn, and it's like you begin to study. You don't finish studying ever.
Yeah.
And actually, Randy Weston would talk about this a lot, because he would say, I'm just a student, and it's exactly what I feel is that, oh yes, I have started to study Pansori. I haven't learned Pansori, it's like I've begun to study it, and it is ongoing. It is ongoing. And of course, sometimes the studies have to be on hold if things like the pandemic, prevent me from going back, or I'm like, I'm in a composition mode right now, so I can't practice that as I can right at this moment, So it's like, yes, and I'm studying biwa. I started to study biwa, Japanese biwa, in 2017 is when I first got my hands on a biwa, and that's what the fellowship was supposed to be for in 2019. But then my dad passed about a month and a half into that fellowship, and but yeah, I've just begun. I've only learned, I will learn one full song, memorize one full song. She taught me another one, but I haven't memorized that one. It takes practice, and that instrument is like, if you don't practice every day, you're going to lose the calluses, and it's going to be really hard to play those high notes again. So it's like, and that's okay. I think everyone has a different purpose, and it's just, it's almost like, actually going back to fertility, a friend of mine said, because the theme I explore in Zero Grasses, and what I'll continue to explore in Fertile Land, Fertile Body, is like how to be an artist and raise a child, and you're a father, right? Yeah. So and so I had a friend who was a mom, who has 2 daughters. She was a former dancer and now is like an arts administrator. And her advice, she said, you can do everything, just not at the same time. It's like, you're going to have to like move things around, but you can do everything. You're just going to have to pick and choose at certain times.
The question is just when.
Yeah, it's just when. So I love that. I loved when she said that. Yeah, so, oh yeah, I think, what else? Your main question was about, What was your main question? I went off on a tangent.
I lost it too, actually.
We're talking about
I lost it too.
language. Oh, appropriation. Right. Yeah. So I was, crediting. I mean, this is obvious. Is to credit everyone. Name everyone. Name all your teachers. Name them. And I
also like the way you deal with the material and the things that you learn, you honor it.
Yeah.
It's not like it's mine and now it's kind of
God, no.
part of my bag of tricks or something. No, you honor it.
Yeah.
And by honoring it, you kind of serve that tradition, but also if you honor something, you're doing it in an honest way. And then it can be part of you. And can be part of your journey.
Right. And I always ask permission from my teachers. I always and what I love is, when I remember I played an arrangement. I'm going to play it for you. Arrangement of this folk song, which I think I recorded. I recorded my arrangement of this song called 5-Hole Tune. But I didn't record this process though. So the original, which is on Bandcamp.
Yeah, I remember that title, but I can't.
It's called 5-Hole Tune. It's on Inner Chapters. Let me just make sure I'm at habit F.
Inner Chapters, that's a solo album.
Yep, it's a solo album.
Yeah.
I'm a little sharp. Yeah, so the folk song that she taught me, this is her version. So,
oh yeah.
Sorry. So I learned that version from her.
Thank you.
And that's on Bandcamp. But but then I was experimenting with changing the tuning, which you could just say is, it's like reharmonizing. But there's a funny story. And it wasn't her who told me. I can't remember which teacher told me, but someone had told me, and maybe it wasn't even a musician. It might have been just someone who knew about this music. But they used to say, he said, "Oh yeah, we think of this one. This lower string is the mother string because she stays at home, and the father string is this one that moves because he's moving around, traveling." And I'm
very
like,
traditional.
And I was like, "Oh my God, that's so backwards,"
Yeah.
And so then I got to thinking, and this is when I think I was on a return trip to study more with her. And I was staying with my translator who she was Australian, Taiwanese Australian woman. Born in Taiwan, now lived in Australia. So I was like just at her house, at the house I was staying at where she was renting, and I was like, what if I take that melody and change move the mother around, basically. So this is what I came up with for that song, this song exactly. So Đi lại gần khâu Boa tawa to để chỉ cần có này tình số tu sẽ ging me awe gasane bua tu so elonia boa naya tu so elonia ma boa naya So yeah, so that's
wow.
that's the, just moving the mother around. And then, so on Bandcamp is an arrangement where I put the harmony onto piano, and then I added a melodic line in the right hand. But you'll hear that the harmonies I just did are became that piece.
Yeah.
My arrangement of it. So yeah, and so I played it for her. The story is I played it, this version of it for her, and just to see what she thought. And she said, in Taiwanese, she said, yes, you can, that's interesting, but you should play my version first and then your version. Whenever you perform it, you should do my version and then your version.
But that's what happens so on the sweet. Album too, right?
On the album, yeah. So I have the original version on there, and then my arrangement. Yes,
beautiful.
Yes. And I did that with a few of those songs, not all of them, but a few of them. And so yeah, I mean that's the dialogue, and even with Sangabari Degi, what's great is I got to do that piece with some of my Korean friends at a festival that this great musician named Wonil, he invited me out there to play. It was the Hwaumsa temple, and he had a festival there. He's an amazing person. Wonil, he's a composer, traditional gugak musician, and like producer and curator. amazing person. So but he invited me, and then I got to perform with like a traditional Taegum player named I Aram, who's wonderful, and then a percussionist who knew a lot about East Coast shaman music, so he was able to play. And so when I played my version of for Wonil, and I had I used Tetunwe Hali, the language, instead of Korean in part of it. And I asked him, like, how is it? And he said, it's better. It's better than the original. I'm like, it's not better, but he loved it. Is what he meant, is that he loved it. And yeah, because he was like, it was so interesting to him to hear different, like Hoarna Samane Lele Ayonan Hoarna Samane to hear that in the style of Korean, they call Donghae An Byoshingut is the name of this tradition. But he was like, wow, So, that dialogue is exciting. And that's what I feel like that's important. Like
just dialogue in general, like if it's an exchange.
Yes, exactly.
It's not a one-way street.
Exactly. So, if he had said, maybe you shouldn't, and actually I messaged my friends. So my generation, kind of the children and the friends, actually I invited them to a performance I did that's where I played that song about Adegi with Simon Barker. and another wonderful Tagan player named Cha Sung-min. And so we did a trio. And so I invited my friends who are part of that family and in that tradition. And he said, yes, our tradition is very open and can be interpreted and used in many ways. So it was beautiful, like I kind of got his permission.
Yeah, approval and permission.
Approval. Yeah. So, not that, of course, there's approval comes in many forms, and I think that kind of approval is a good kind of approval that you want. If you're talking to elders, learning from them, and the approval that isn't great for composers is just like wanting general audience like approval, and that's what I'm trying to let that go, because I think approval.
How do you do it?
I think for a lot of and this begins at childhood. I think because I was born in Peoria, Illinois, and trying to fit in and just be accepted, people pleasing and seeking approval and being liked, that was how I survived. That was like a survival mechanism, so once you learn that as a child, it's hard to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And I think as an artist, even when I was doing classical music, like I think a lot of the reasons why I practiced so hard was because I wanted to please my teacher, and and even the way I acted, very docile, and I learned that from my mom. It's like, okay, you're very you be very gentle, and everyone's gonna like you, and so I think caring what people think that was a natural thing coming out of that childhood and in that environment. But if you want to like be irreverent and be courageous, and that approval seeking is kind of
it doesn't go together.
Doesn't go well with that. So so that's like something I've always been trying to let go of, and getting better. I've gotten a lot better, but yeah, it's a constant struggle, because
you talked about denial before, and I guess the opposite of that is acceptance, and being like more okay with who you are and what
that's
that
true.
brings,
Yeah, that is true. Yes. Yeah, have to accept and not be too hard on oneself.
Yeah. It's not easy.
Yeah. It is a process, but yeah, so all those things.